What is it like, and what does it take to literally be the greatest in the world in some area of note? Is it talent, drive, consistency, luck, mindset? We'll be uncovering the answer to that and a variety of other keys to peak performance with multiple-time world champion triathlete Chris Macca McCormack on this episode of the Catalyst 360 podcast, your trusted resource for engaging, evidence-based health, wellness, and performance insights. I'm your host, Dr. Brad Cooper of Catalyst Coaching 360, and whether you're an executive, entrepreneur, athlete, parent, teacher, or coach, our discussion today will most certainly be a valuable investment of your time. Chris McCormack has won over 200 races, including a pair of victories at the Hawaii Ironman World Championship and 7 World Cup championships. His unique approach to both physical and mental preparation served him well over his long and successful career, and we'll dig into how those strategies can be used not just by triathletes, but by anyone looking to up their game in today's competitive world. Speaking of competitive worlds, we've been having quite a few organizations reach out to us about advertising here on the Catalyst 360 podcast, but we continue to turn them down. Our regular listeners know we briefly mentioned MBHWC-approved coach training certifications, along with options for employers, EAPs, and wellness providers to integrate coaching into the services they provide in supporting the big three: physical, emotional, and mental health of employees and clients nationwide. Otherwise, no ads, and we plan to keep it that way. We appreciate the support of all the coaches who have become a part of the Catalyst community and our many organizational partners who have trusted us here at Catalyst Coaching 360 to come alongside you and provide credible, nationally board certified and personalized coaching over the years. If you would like to learn more information about any of these, please reach out to us anytime. Results@catalystcoaching360.com. That's results@catalystcoaching360.com. Or head over to the website catalystcoaching360.com. Your ongoing support makes this podcast possible without us having to splice in a bunch of ads. So thank you. Now, it's time to dig into the keys to peak performance with multiple-time world champion Chris Macca McCormack on the latest episode of the Catalyst 360 podcast. Chris McCormack, buddy, it is great to see you. Congratulations on all the accolades. We're here. I'm excited to see what is happening post-race, but we'll dig into that a little bit. Welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks, Coop. It's great to be here. I know we've been trying to get on for a while, communicating through.
We got it going. Exactly.
We got it though.
Exactly. 200 race victories, 12 Ironman World Champions, and 7 World Cup Championships. I think a lot of people that aren't triathletes have no idea the range of that. If you had to pick out one, I know that's tough, as your all-timer, which one would it be? Is it one of the 2 Kona victories? Is it one that maybe people aren't so much aware of? What would pop to the top?
For me, funnily enough, it was my first World Championship at the ITU level, now the World Triathlon level, predominantly because I grew up as a runner, and I became a triathlete in Australia at the emergence of triathlon was sort of booming here in the late 80s, early 90s, off the back of amazing athletes like Greg Welsh and McKeely Jones, who are superstars, who've done so successfully well in the United States, but they grew up in my town. So I was very, very fortunate that they came from the same village as I came from. A village, it's a beach town in southern Sydney. And I just wanted to emulate what they did. And they went through this ITU system, which was, there was a big drive pre the 2000 Olympics. Triathlon was going to make its debut at those Olympics in Sydney, and being a Sydney boy, and triathlon was going to be the opening event of those games. So, as a junior kid, I just wanted to be like them. And I used to, in Australia, I used to be on television, a lot of the short course races. Ironman was a very different looking sport than we know today. I think there was like 8 or 9 Ironmans around the world. So, the Hawaiian Ironman was always the pinnacle of the sport, but it didn't look like a brand that it did today. So there was a lot more community-based sports and a lot more community-based events and a lot more professional events. And the ITU came along in 1989 and sort of made a World Series. And I saw the opportunity to be a part of that. Mark Allen won the first ever one in 1989 in Avignon, France. And I qualified as a junior in Manchester in 1993 and got to experience what it was like to be a professional athlete at that point, coming through a federation-driven system. So my father was against that completely because, he wanted me to go to college. He was like, you're going to college and triathlon doesn't get you into college, and all those discussions that most young people have with their parents when they're 18 and 19 years of age, looking at college. And so he was really against any, and Australia looks very different than the United States. So it's probably an odd conversation to say, pro sport, because Australians, if you didn't play rugby, then there was no such thing as pro sport, really.
Right.
You know, like in Australia, we only knew rugby and cricket. And here's me saying, I want to be a professional triathlete. My father nearly had a heart attack going, what does that mean? And what is triathlon? So I think for me, and, finishing college, dropping out of the sport, probably at my peak when I was doing well, to finish college, to appease my father's ambitions for me, taking a job and then deciding to turn my back on that to pursue a career in this sport that I saw was growing up. I was paying attention to it. My dad was still watching the rugby and leaving it all and then pursuing that for 18 months and then coming back here to race as an elite in the World Championships in Australia. 3 years before the Sydney Olympic Games, the sport, people were well aware of the sport, and to win that at home with 100,000 spectators and my mum and dad to be there.
Wow.
I turned to my dad and said, Dad, this is what I do. This is pro. And I just saw his face like, okay, I get it. I understand it. But to me, that will always be, I guess your first World Championship is always important. But to me, it was always a race. It was amazing. It was probably one of my greatest performances, and to share it with mum and dad and my brothers and to do it at home in Australia and to be able to call yourself a world champion, that will always be the most special victory in my life.
Wow. And you were 20 at the time? That was 93?
22. I was, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. That was 1990. I won in 96. Sorry, I was 23, yeah.
Got it.
So,
wow.
Yeah.
All right. So success across so many different distances. Kona success came late. What eventually led? I've read your book, got it here. I know your story, but I want you to I want you to tell everybody else what eventually led to that. I mean, what I remember is you were kind of cocky going into that. You're like, yeah, hey, Dad, I'll go pick up the check. I'll meet you afterwards. We're good to go. But what led from incredible success young to going out there thinking this will just be another box to check, and then, oh, wait a minute, this is a different animal?
Well, look, I'd always grown up watching Kona, so I had an immense respect for it. So I remember in those early years when people were saying, geez, he's a cocky, disrespectful kid, I used to take that to heart, right? Because I was like, there's never been a
That's not me. Yeah.
That's not me. I'm the biggest fan of this race. I could commentate every race from 1986 to now. And I have done to a lot of my peers, like Mark Allen, Christian Bustos in the past. They laugh because they're like, man, I said I used to watch the VHS videos from school, just wanting to be one of these guys. But, I got onto that, winning the World Championships. I was world number one in ITU for so many years. And then my mother passed away prior to Sydney, the Olympics. And my federation, for the first time, left me off the team. She died a month before the games, and they decided that I wasn't in the right headspace, probably correctly, but I thought that was a decision I should make. And when they left me off the start line in Sydney, I was devastated. Is an understatement. And I at that point in my life, I thought, well, I never want to rely on. I want to take control of my career and never want to rely on the federation, because prior to that, racing in that World Cup series around the world, you raced as part of the Australian team. And so you worked with that federation. So at that point, there was only, you either did that short course racing or you did Ironman. There was no Ironman 70.3 series. There was nothing. None of that existed. So the jump up in distances was enormous. Now pros can cut their teeth over the half Ironman, we used to call it back then, but the 70.3 now, and then learn their craft and then step up. That just didn't exist. And so a lot of people said I was cocky, but I look at it this, I sort of came out of banking, finished uni, and I won everything. Like I was winning races. I was world champion, world number one for 3 years. Okay, they left me off the Olympics. So I went from 2000 to 2002, undefeated for 3 years, 33 race wins from 33 starts, won the Goodwill Games, won every major thing you could. And then I did my first ever half Ironman, which was at Wildflower against Macca, Jürgen, Zach, and I smashed them and broke 4 hours. Like this 4-hour magical mark at Wildflower that had never been done on my first attempt. Bang, I did it. And I'm like, these guys are useless, right? That was sort of my, and so it sort of fed this. You live in this world where you're like, well, you build yourself up because you are relatively insecure as an athlete. And then I went to my first Ironman that I'd ever done. Firstly, I lied. Firstly, I went back to my federation and said they tried to get me back to go for Athens, for the Olympics in Athens, and I said, look, I'll go to Athens if you pick me now, because I was living in the United States at the time, and they wanted me to move back to Australia, and I said, no, I'm enjoying my life. And when they said no, the comment that the head of the high performance said, here, what are you going to do, Macca? If you don't do that, what are you going to do, Ironman? You're too big to be an Ironman. We know that. We know your data. And I said, that's exactly what I'm going to do. And so I entered the Australian Ironman in April of 2002. Again, give context, there was 10 Ironman races in the world. So now we get excited about, now half the Ironman champions I don't even know now. But back then, on that start list was Norman Stadler, Peter Reed, the current world champion, Thomas Hellriegel, who'd won Kona. Right. Like I turned up in Australia and they were the best of the best. And then myself and Craig Waltman on debut rode off the front, swam away from him, rode off the front, and I hung on to win an Ironman on debut. So I've done one half, Wildflower, beaten everyone at that distance, which was the unofficial world championships back then. And then my first Ironman, I've smashed the current world champion on debut. My natural instinct was, cool, I've got this. Like Kona, I'll go there, I'll win this, and then let's go back and win the Olympics. Sort of what the Norwegians are doing now, right?
Seriously.
It was just, I think I got myself in trouble when, trouble's probably the wrong word, but when I sat down at doing the interview in Kona, and I had never realized, I'd always watched that hour and a half documentary that they put on ABC or see back then, beautiful with the music and and the beautiful voice. And I said, I can't wait to do it. And I started getting interviewed by Peter Henning, who was responsible for building out 20 years of Ironman. He put Ironman on the map. He was the TV producer. And before me, Thomas Hellriegel had just gone on, and the one before that. So I watched these two interviews before me and heard these guys like, I don't really focus on anybody else. I just let the day unfold. It was very bland, right? I was like,
enough of this.
And I sat down and they asked me how I thought I was going to go. And I said, well, I didn't come here for a holiday. Like I came here to win this race. I've watched this race for years and I'm here to win, which is where the name of the book came from. And I'll never forget Peter Henning was standing behind the camera guy and he sort of glanced out to have another look at me. Like, who is this guy? Right. And as they do, they deep dive. They start asking more and more and more questions because they're thinking of the story they're going to build if I win and the story I'm going to build if I fail. And they started asking questions about paying your dues. I said, paying my dues? Like, what does that mean? I said, I've been a professional for 7 years. I'm a professional athlete. I've paid up in full, mate. Like I'm here to win, right? And they're like, what about this guy? This guy? I said, well, I've only raced them a couple of times and I flogged them both. What's different? Yeah, but what about the history of Kona? So obviously, when I ultimately fell apart in that race, that's what they put on the. But I remember thinking, wow, nowadays with social media, I could have painted a much different. But back then, you the story of you got told by others, so others' perception of you was what it was, and I immediately became sort of this cocky kid, which was just 100% not what I was. That was just I was a very highly competitive individual who was impatient to collect the titles that my idols like Mark Allen and that had done. And that was how I phrased it. And people took it the wrong way. But it was a very, very long journey. That one lesson I learned from 2002 was Kona was a very, very special beast that deserved a lot more respect. And winning Ironman in Australia meant one thing, still a very difficult race, but winning on the big island is, the conditions of that island come into play. And I never really appreciated what that really meant. Yeah, sure, I'd seen it on the video, but until you feel the energy lab, and until you feel that oppressive humidity, no one gets it. Yeah. No one gets it. Yeah.
So 2007, I think, is when you won your first one. Is that correct?
Yeah. It was difficult because between 2002 I DNF'd and I had my first one and I didn't really appreciate what that meant because when it was falling apart, I was leading the race until 10 miles. I had a 13-minute lead off the bike. As I said, I high-fived my father. This is a breeze. Like, these guys suck. Sort of ran up Palani Hill and then, suddenly you have 13, 14 miles to go and it's getting uncut. You're starting to cramp. And I remember cramping up so badly, I put my head in a bucket, which became a big picture that everyone used to spread around on the magazines back then. And I still recall going up the hill when Tim de Boom and Peter Reed ran past me. I'd been leading all day since the swim. And Tony de Boom, Tim's brother, was on the side of the road. And, all the press before it had shown all these things of me saying I'm going to win it and I'm going to do it. And as they ran past me to take the lead of the race, Tony de Boom said, "Welcome to Kona, punk." I was like, oh, I've upset some people here. And literally 2 hours later, 2 miles later, I was out of the race. But what I hadn't appreciated was the importance of finishing one of these things. So to me, it was just and that was when the backlash came. And so I swore I'd never not finish again. And so I went back in 2003, again, let off the bike, walked to blew apart in the lava fields. And you know, I tell a lot of the people now, and they look at me like, wow, really? I had no nutrition, I had no idea about anything. And there was an element of pride and ego attached to what I was doing because I didn't want to ask questions. So to give you some example, in an Olympic distance race, I used to take one gel in the whole race.
Yeah, you're done.
So my knowledge, my headspace was, okay, in an Ironman, I'll take 4 gels. So my first Kona and the first Ironman I won, I had 4 gels. Yeah. Like, that is just like, I just did not understand that space, hydration. So Kona really taught me to do that. So I failed again in 2023, but I walked to the finish line. I think I finished in 9 hours and 6 minutes and 30th place or something. And I was like, oh, wow. And I was starting to think, you know, it's 2003, Athens is coming. I'm still new to long course. Again, there's still no 70.3. So you're either doing Ironmans and racing some non-drafting events in the States. That's your career, or you're doing the world circuit, which I walked away from, which I dominated for 6 years. It's like I say now, it's like Alistair Brownlee leaving at the height of everything and pushing it all away and moving over here. And so I was sort of in this conundrum of, do I go back? And my pride kept me there because I'm like, once you start down this Kona path, you know, I've got to conquer this, solve this puzzle. I just didn't think it'd take so long to solve. And then I went back in 2004. And again, I was leading, and this was a major turning point for me because, you know, between 2003 and 2004, I might have failed in Kona, but I won Roth, I won Ironman Australia, I won Wildflower, I won Alcatraz. I was undefeated. Yeah. So it's funny, people go, oh, he failed all these years.
And just real quick for the non-triathlete fans out there, the races he just listed would be probably the next 4 on a list of order of big races around the world. So keep going. I just want to give folks some context.
Yeah, if it's tennis, it was like, if it would be tennis, it's like I won the Australian Open, the US Open, the French Open, but I lost in Wimbledon. So everyone would say, you suck.
You're a failure.
Right? You know, I'd be like, well, hang on a sec. No one's measuring. Like, I've had the most incredible seasons, but you're just measuring my performance because you see me as this cocky kid. You want me to fail in Kona, and I'm continually failing. So it's a great narrative for you to write about in the magazines. And so in 2003, I'll never forget it. I was in absolute agony and I was going backwards. I think I was leading, and then they caught me about 6 miles on the run. And by 14 miles into the run, I was in about 5th or 6th place. I was in a really bad way. And I was about to run into the energy lab. And I'll never forget, I was sponsored by a bicycle company back then called Kestrel. Preston Sandusky, the CEO of Kestrel, was there with Mark Allen and my agent, Scott Fairchild. And I just saw them there sitting by the car. Back then you could drive out to the area. That's all shut off now. And I just got into the car. I saw them there, the door open, they're all looking, what are you doing? I said, I'm out. Like, I'm done. And I said, I'm done with Ironman. I can't do this, you know, and at that time, Mark Allen was coaching Peter Reid, who went on to win that race. And I was in the car, and I knew Mark had failed here 6 times. And I was just devastated. I was like, I'm done with Ironman. I'm retiring from this. I'm going back to what I can do. I'm quitting on this. It's too hard. And I pleaded with Mark in the car to help me. I said, look, the funny thing is, you're in agony, as everybody knows who does it. But when you stop and the air conditioning's on, the pain's gone, and you just hate yourself, you know, like
totally.
It's this heavy weight that sits on you. And I'm like, I can't get out of the car now. I've quit. So I just felt, down on myself. And he said, look, I can't help you, but you're going to sit here and you're going to watch Peter go on to win his 3rd title. So I had to sit there and watch one of my peers who Mark was working with and he was amazing. Peter Reid is the most underspoken about triathlete that has ever existed. The guy is a god, in my opinion. He was amazing. And he went on to dominate the race. And I pleaded with Mark to help me, and Mark sat down with me after the race. And I was expecting Mark Allen, who's I consider the greatest triathlete of all time, to give me some secret training session I needed to do.
Undo the scrolls. Here you go.
Yeah, open the okay. This is what, don't tell anybody, but this is what you need to do. And instead he he said that I needed to make peace with the island, that I'd come in here too brash. He's a very spiritual guy who had a lot of his own demons he had to play out on those lava fields. And he said, you're replicating what I went through, and you need to make peace with the island. And he did that through the Weijul Indian traditions and vision quests. And, you know, a lot of people thought he was out there, but it's what you need to do to get your head right to do this race. And that's what he found himself. And I remember at the time thinking, what? You want me to make peace with the island? And his advice was I needed to go home, find something very special to me, come back here alone. He'd made Peter do it, spend some time on the island and bury something on the top of Mauna Kea to give back peace to the island, and then come back with more respect of the island, not so much the race.
Sure.
No, he said, it's your attitude. You've come in here going, oh, I control this place. You don't control it. This island controls it. I remember at the time thinking, this guy's nuts. But that was my first. Oh, my, what? This guy's crazy. And then the other advice he told me was I race too much. He said, I'm a racer. He said, you're racing, 17, 18 times a year, 2 Ironmans, you're winning them, you're doing 4 half Ironmans, all the series. He said, you need to be fat in July. You're too thin in July. You need somewhere to build the training block for. And he said, because you're prepping for 3 Ironmans every year, you're doing 3 heavy blocks of work. It's too much. You're too fatigued, too early in the season. So I took that away, and I did exactly what he said. I took some time out in the year, and I went to Hawaii, and I trained on the island alone by myself, rented a place, and I did it. I went up there. And so in 2005, I came back, revigorated, had an amazing year, and I fell apart again on the bike. I was vomiting on the bike. I got all my nutrition dialed in, and Thomas Hellriegel talked me back into the race. I was going to pull out. I'm not pulling out. I'm finishing this thing. And he told me to drink Coke and water, where I'd been following this amazing nutritional plan by the Australian Institute of Sport. And I ended up having, for the back end of this Ironman, an amazing race, and just felt empowered. On the run, I ran a 2:44 marathon, I think, fastest marathon of the day. I ran myself in 5th position. So that was the first. Whilst I hadn't won, I finished 5th, but I finished with strength. Every other time I'd collapse and cramping. But again, it wasn't good enough for my sponsors. And they were like, 5th, he didn't win. You're supposed to be the heir apparent. And, now Norman Stadler's won it. And then so I came back in 2006, and I had the war with Norman Stadler, but I was starting to build confidence, and that's what kept me in the race. And I realized I could win this event. I just needed to dial things in a little bit and find my way. And 2006, I think, was my greatest performance in Kona. I finished 2nd to Norman by 71 seconds. And then we ended up having a bit of an argument. Norman and I had known each other our entire lives as athletes. And we had a bit of a clashing of egos, I guess, coming so close to each other. And I just swore that in 2007 I'd go back and win it. And at that point in my career, had I not won in 2007, I felt that a lot of people would have moved on because it was too long.
That was year 5 for you? Year
5, yeah. 5th attempt. They're like, man, we waited 5 years. You've got 5th and 2nd, but so is this guy and this guy. There's a lot of people. Right. You're supposed to be the heir apparent. You're supposed to be the next. They talked about you as the next Mark Allen or the next. You're not really delivering, sort of thing. So I did feel the pressure at 2007, and just to give that context again, that 2006 year and that closest ever finish. Norman and I were number 1 and number 2 in the world. We've known each other since juniors in 93. Norman, I felt, was a more inferior athlete than I am. And I made that clear in our fight. And I believe that he believed that. But in Ironman racing, he had a lot more experience and a lot more strength. And he was a warrior. I give Norman that. We're very close friends now. He was an absolute warrior of a man. And that's the one thing you learn in Ironman racing is it's an unspoken respect you get because Absolutely. You see the toughness. Yeah. The toughness of individuals. When you go to war with someone like that, there's some that fall and crack, and there's some that just don't give up an inch, and they just fight and fight. And that's a unspoken respect that you really appreciate when you get out of the sport, how tough some people are mentally, physically, emotionally. And he was one of those individuals. And so I guess that clashing of that after 2006, we had a loggerhead, had a lot of words to each other, and I chased him around the world all 2007 and raced him and picked on him, and because I believed I was better, and I needed to feed this belief system because I was starting to question whether I had what it takes to win this race. Sure. Is in 2006 coming second, I ended up in the medical tent with 2 liters of IV and my father standing above me. I had 2 kids at the time. I was still young, but my dad saying, you don't need this sport, man, in your life. Like, what are you doing? You know, you're about to die. And so, you know, there's a lot of people around you questioning, and you're questioning it in your own head. So I had to create this alter ego, this nut job, crazy guy that was just going to intimidate and push, because I needed that in the way Mark Allen needed his spirituality point of thing. I needed this anger to force myself to dig beyond depth to win this thing, because it was desperate. And yeah, and delivering in 2007 was exactly that. But I do recall waking up race morning after everything had been set, after the press was writing everything about this war that was about to happen between the Germans and myself. And it had been a crazy year. Even my wife going, you need to calm down. Like, it's like
when your wife steps up, that's when you know you're in trouble.
That was basically, I looked in the mirror that morning at 4:30 before walking down, say to myself, this is it. Like, the bullshit stops here, man. You know, all that's just words. You know, like you don't deliver here, it's done. This is your career. This is game day, but everything stops after this. And I really went into it, and I was that way. But I had built a lot of confidence from my season, the way the race had started to unfold, and sort of the main players that I thought were going to be players, I think crumbled under the pressure of that expectation that I'd loaded on them. And I'd been so much of a bully is probably the right word to them all year, because I felt they disrespected me. So I was like, okay, gloves are off. If you think you're tough, let's play the game. And I think they folded. Faris Al Sultan and Norman ended up collapsing in the lava fields, and that opened up a new group of athletes that were coming in Nico Lanos, Craig Alexander. They were all in this group, and I was very aware of who they were. And on paper, they were much more superior runners than I was. And they were able to tag me on the bike. And I just thought, I'm going to race this race with sheer craziness. And if they want to win it, I think in the headspace I'm in, I can out-muscle them. I always sort of, as a boxing match, I can just, rope-a-dope like Muhammad Ali did, let Foreman keep throwing those punches and then knock them out when the time's right. So I got off the bike with Craig, who I believe is still the greatest runner that's ever done our sport in heat. And yeah, usually he would run over the top of me in a marathon or a half marathon. And I just ran off at stupid pace and baited him to come, because I think you get excited in races like that when you think things are coming your way and falling your way. And he was new to Ironman racing himself. He'd only done 3 of them. And I think he thought, I can win Kona here. I'm going to win Hawaii. I'm going to go with Macca. And so you throw strategy out the wall. Nowadays, everything's so perfectly dialed in. You've got watches, you've got monitors that tell you when to eat. You're a cyborg nowadays. Back then, there was a lot more spontaneity in the racing, and there was a lot more blow-ups, and people took chances. There wasn't the data to feed you that information. You didn't just sit there using your power meter, sitting in a zone, and you went with the pace. And no, it's too quick. You opted to back off. I think the only data most people were using back then was maybe a heart rate monitor, right? So in the running in particular, and nowadays you've got the Garmin telling you in real time what pace you're running, but we could only check our run pace every mile because you just had a Timex watch.
Interesting.
And you just hope the mile markers were correctly measured.
Right.
So it's a 5:30 mile, and so it was. And then the next mile you'd have to adjust your pace. So pace strategy was very different than it looks today, and that's where I think the athletes today have dialed it in. And I ran out a ridiculous pace, and Craig and Tim de Boom took the bait. They came with me. And at the top of Palani, I started gapping them, and they started to fall apart, and that was the winning hand. And I was just, at that point in my career, you would have had to run over me with a truck because there was no way I was not going to win that race. I had the grip between my teeth, and I was able to run home. And I still recall, because I promised my mother on a deathbed that I would do this, win this race for her. And I still recall at about 4 miles from home, I knew I had it won, and I started celebrating, going, yeah, look, it was a long way out. It's still got, 6 or 7 kilometers of running, and my legs started giving out. And that was when I went, oh, hey, don't count your chickens. Yeah, don't count your chickens. And I got back in the zone, and I ran to the finish line. And to give perspective, if anyone sees a photo, the emotion of that win for me was, I talk about the Worlds being the most important race to me that I won in 97, but the emotion of that 2007 win just because of the journey, because of promises I'd made, because of what the race had meant to me, because of the way I attacked it, because of everything that happened, and just getting that monkey off my back, like the pressure of what failure that day would have meant was enormous. And I didn't take the sponges out. So my younger brother still gives me a hard time. He's like, your finished photo look ridiculous.
Nice pose, bro.
I crossed the line with these sponges in my lap, but it was a beautiful day, an amazing day. And Dad was there, and obviously my wife and kids, and still a very, very special day. I don't recall the last 400 meters because I was so emotional. And that's, I like to tell people that because I always fought against that cocky brand that I had. And this, I was definitely outspoken and competitive, but the respect I had for that race, you saw that, what it meant to me. It meant everything. And the fact that I walked away from Olympics, I walked away from everything to get it, was primarily because of athletes that I looked up to. Mark Allen, Dave Scott, Greg Walsh, Peter Reed, athletes I wanted to emulate. And they were the reason I wanted that title, to be in that club. And that was it. And it was amazing to finally get in the club.
As you're talking about that, I'm thinking Prefontaine, his famous quote about, and I've looked it up, the best pace is a suicide pace and today is a good day to die. Did you have that thing resonate? Because you almost said those words just now. Yeah, it was pretty much the attitude. It was like, look, if you're better than me, you can get it. But man, you're going to have to move through. You're going to have to run through walls because I'm not handing this over to anybody. And if you want to come with it, this is the pace. You want to win the title, I'm setting the pace. You're going to look at your watch and go, this is nuts. Start questioning whether it is, because I'm nuts today. And that was sort of how I viewed it. I've always been a fan of boxing, and I always love the Rumble in the Jungle, right? Sure.
Because
you can hear a lot of that too. Yeah, absolutely.
Ali did the impossible, right? He came up against the impossible, and only he believed. And I felt at that point in my career, only I believed, right? And, a lot of people around you are like, hey, you think. And I had to take the punches and wait for that opportunity and bait people into second guessing themselves. Because in Ironman racing, it's all about that uncomfortable conversation you have with yourself during a race for hours and hours and hours, and you second guessing. And it's those second guesses that cost you the race. I've said it a lot of times. I win a race in an Ironman, say by 4 minutes. It's not as if over that 8 hours, you slowly, every hour you pull 10 seconds. It happens in an instant. You're with someone and then they grab 2 minutes because something happens for a period of time that you let go or you emotionally succumb. And I was determined that day that any emotional hardware that came my way that was negative, I was dealing with at that point in time. And I was going to shut it down and just keep pushing and bait them into coming and make them have the same conversations with themselves. And hopefully they'd succumb to their own self-doubts. And that's how you win races over the endurance over an Ironman.
So, Chris, we've got a lot of folks that maybe are vaguely familiar with triathlon, but they're coming at it from an entrepreneur perspective or an executive perspective or a coach or something like that. You shared a ton of stuff in there, and we can unpack a lot of different aspects of it. But are there certain things that rise to the top for you that you think apply across settings? So take triathlon out of the equation, the mental piece, the preparation, the emotional, controlled emotion that you had, the way that you put kind of Rocky Balboa, putting the guy on the mirror so you can keep focused on what you're doing every single day. Are there those kinds of things that you think apply regardless of your setting?
Yeah, look, I sort of feel like I've lived two lives, and you have this first life, which is very much it's semi-narcissistic, but it's very insular. You're very much. I found I was very much in my own head and trying to deal with insecurities, deal with public perception, deal with my own competitive urges, deal with the what ifs, deal with a finite amount of time. And the way I dealt with that was probably the ability, or my thought in my head, I thought I could outwork anybody. And that was, and I still think that correlates. And now I've moved into the business world. I was shocked at the level of work people do for their expectation. In sport, it's you don't work, you're exposed instantly, right? And also I think in sport there's an element of courage, especially to do a fringe sport, and so it's sort of an entrepreneurial mindset to some degree where, I walked away from everything to, walked away from, I finished college and my master's degree, and I had a job at and I had a great job. And there's a very, very consistent pathway to the top. You see it in front of you, and there's the guys next to you, and you just know you got to do your time and you get there. And it's not really, you walk away from that to pursue a career in a fringe sport, and you take chances and you build a life, and you put sponsors, and you win and you lose more than you win, and you have to pick yourself up all the time, pick yourself up. So it's a certain way of thinking, right? And dealing with failure is something that a lot of people nowadays don't really confront in their life. They just continually do the same thing. Where it's something as I felt in my life, I was always unpacking failures, and even successes. I was unpacking where I could do better. I was always self-reflecting. And so I think the takeaway that I learned from sport and what I was doing there, and I've realized now I've got my businesses, and what I'm doing is that mindset, that attitude, that is what success. If someone wanted to know what success is, okay, it looks different from the outcome. But if you want to be successful, there's not one individual that doesn't work hard. And everyone can say they work hard, but they work efficiently. They self-assess constantly. They can be the problem, right? You have to look at if you're the problem. A lot of people look outwards and go, "Mate, he's crap," and they're very good to blame. You see athletes leave coach to coach to coach because it can't be their fault. It's got to be the coach's fault why they didn't win, right? And you need to properly self-assess, surround yourself with honest people that are aligned. I guess that's the whole team discussion that business people can talk about, building the right team that are very aligned, and believing in that vision. It's almost a purpose, right? And it's insidious. It's an obsession, and I think that's what I took out of it. And when you put yourself in that mindset and that way of thinking, and the people around you think that way, it becomes you. It is what you are, and you don't tolerate anyone. And I still recall an article Timothy Carlson wrote about. It was relatively negative, even though I ran all this stuff. And it was like Chris McCormack whilst an incredible athlete, he only surrounds himself with people who tell him what he wants to hear. And I said, that's by choice. Absolutely, Tim. But why are you pointing that as a negative thing? That's absolutely the facts. I only put myself around people that believe that I could win. If I went to this nutritionalist and he said, "No, you're too big, you'll never win." No, I don't want you in my team. I need someone who believes, right? Like, that is going to tell me how to win, not tell me why I shouldn't. I need problem solvers. I need solution-driven people. And so, yes, I did surround myself with people that were solution-driven and believed in we were going the same way. So I did that in life. So the lessons
it sounds like you surrounded yourself with people that believed in the same outcome, but challenged you in your steps to getting to that outcome. So the nutritionists believed that you could get there, but they came in and said, "But you're doing it wrong, Macca. You need to have more of this or more of that." And that's what you were looking for.
Exactly. And you have to have the strength of character as an individual. When you put experts in their field, don't be the bottleneck. You put them there for a reason.
Exactly.
Take on that information and how I said, you're the CEO of your own company. And people are like, "Oh, you're a bit melodramatic. You're a triathlete." I'm like, yeah, but my little triathlon world,
it's huge.
Whilst it's not, I'm the CEO of this thing. I've got to take responsibility for the winnings, and I'm going to take responsibility for the failures. And I'm going to build a team around me that tells me how to do it. And if I second guess them, sure, I can have open conversations. But for me, I was always a curious individual, and I wanted to understand, so that if I ever faced those conversations in my head, I had the answers, the depth of answers. Like, okay, I'm cramping. I need this, this, and this. Right? It wasn't just yelling out to my nutritionist, "Hey, I'm cramping. What do I do?" There was always So I really saw it as a CEO role. So my transition out of sport was relatively easy because I applied it to what I wanted to do. A lot of people think that's a stupid idea, but my dad thought being a triathlete was a stupid idea. So I never thought any idea was stupid, right? Like, so, and now 10 years on, the same sort of thing happened in sport. People are like, "Wow, you're being really successful in these things you've done. How did you do it?" I'm like, I just did it, and I believed it could happen. like, and the same way, I failed at a lot of things that I entered, but it didn't define the direction I was going. And so that was sort of the takeaway. But my one thing that I noticed when I did leave, and I started trying to bring in a lot of the peers that I'd worked with in sport or raced with in sport, and a lot of them were saying, like, you know, a lot of conversation around, why do you think some athletes don't transition to a life after sport very well? I think they changed who they are and what made them great. In my head, they're so courageous, and they're such risk takers in some degree to go after a race winner. But then they leave sport and they suddenly put a moat around what they have, and they define themselves by that, and they change. So they no longer take any risks anymore. I'm going to do this and keep all that over here. There's no more. And I found that amazing, because I thought, when we finish this, I'm going to work with him and him, because, you know, I have so much respect for the way they think. But I realized on the outside, well, they almost become, not cowards is the wrong word, but they're a completely different animal. And you realize that the sport was their identity, and it wasn't the journey that became, for me, the journey was my identity, not what I did in it. It was how I did it. That's how I learned on my journey through sport. It was how this can make me better to get that outcome. But that journey was the strength that I then took to other, and you just apply it in other fields, and it works. Work hard, take chances, bring in the right team, have open conversations, reflect on things, think, put the workload in, trial, test, fail, don't do that. You know, it's basic. It's not that difficult to do. And I'm not a billionaire by any means, but I just found that was quite interesting as I moved out.
So I think you just wrote your next book outline. So I just want to reemphasize, because I don't think we hear that concept almost anywhere. Your idea that you bring in the yes people on the outcome, you bring in the people on the process. And I think leadership writers tend to go one way or the other. They either say, oh, that person has too many yes people around them, or they don't have enough yes people. And you're saying, no, you're missing it. You need to believe the outcome. You need to believe the destination, but we need to bang heads together on the way we're going to get there.
You nailed it. And that's what I did in everything. My sports psychologist, my nutritionist, and now it's funny because I work a lot with the current, well, he's not the current, but a guy called Jan Frodeno, the Olympic champion. He's won 3.
Yeah.
And, you know, Jan's been in my life for quite some time. And he's done that very, very successfully. And now it's a very different, they've got more extensions of that. There's a media team, content teams, because you can build a brand and create an audience that we didn't have that opportunity. And you can leave the sport with, you know, 1 million followers per se, and you have an audience that you can then monetize post-career. And social media and the new media platforms have enabled that to happen. And he has very successfully done that. And people look at it, I'm like, how do you not, people just, his peers and others look at just the results. Oh, he's unbelievable. He's the great. He's the GOAT. They throw this. I'm like, why aren't you unpacking that and understanding how he's the GOAT? Like, you're so shallow in your thinking. Like, I'd be sitting there looking and going, well, what's he doing that I'm not? Why has he got a nutritionist? What is that nutrition? Oh, okay. Well, I'd be, you know, I'm a problem solver. I'm curious. I think maybe it's a character trait. I was always a curious individual, and I'm curious to understand what makes people good or great at a field. I'm very respectful of excellence in any capacity, and I'm always eager to understand how they did it. It's just a curiosity that I then apply to myself. And, you know, I never thought, you know, a lot of people go, oh yeah, but you're amazing. I never thought I wasn't the fastest kid at school. I wasn't, you know, but all as I kept turning up. That's the one thing I do. I was the worst soccer player in my team, but I never missed a training session because I loved it, and that's me. I think that's probably my greatest strength. I never stop turning up. I'm quite content. I can outwork anybody, and not that that's a big, I'm the man, but I am.
It's just character trait. It's just who you are. Yeah. We've done 270 episodes of the Cattle 360 podcast, and the two things that continue to rise to the top are hard work, obviously, and curiosity. And those are the two things that you pointed to right out. So that's
I was unique.
You're on that sharp edge. All right. So you turned 50 this year. You've talked
Thanks for reminding me.
Yeah. Sorry, buddy. I'm 57 this year, so we can compare notes on that one later. But the transition, you talked a little bit about life after being a professional athlete. Business aside, what's that been like? Because before you were like, I'm getting out for a 4-hour ride today. Tomorrow's my lift day, and I'm doing a run in the afternoon. It was boom, boom, boom. How has the personal life changed, the mindset, those other components as you've made that shift from, and we're going to talk about London Marathon here in a second, but from this is my income, this is my livelihood, to this is something I enjoyed doing?
Yeah, I think I was always ready to retire because I always had a father that was like, he used to call me the golden child. Like, oh, mate, he never worked a day in his life, this kid. That's, my dad was like, never worked a day in his life. It's just, mate, bless this one. I was like, oh, thanks, Dad. But so I was always very, very well aware that there was a dead stop. As an athlete, there is a fine. So I was always preparing for an exit. A lot of athletes prepare for an exit. It's like they didn't realize this retirement thing was on the horizon. It's like, I was preparing. I wanted to retire in 2009. I thought I'd win Kona in 2007. Actually, had I won in 2008, I would have gone because I had 2 kids. I really, I felt a lot, coming from Australia, my wife's Australian, my kids are Australian, and we lived abroad. There was a desire to go home. We wanted to go home at one point. My kids were starting school. Do I set them up in another country? And so, I was always prepared for that. And I didn't win Kona in 2009. And so it's what kept me in the sport. But we ultimately moved home. But I was always preparing. So I always believed that you needed a good network, and triathlon had a great network of people. So I was very, very good at networking, not so much from a business point of view, but from a lot of the people that do this sport are very high net worth individuals. Sure. They're very, very successful in their fields. And as I said, the curiosity to get to know them and understand what they were doing, because I was preparing for a life after sport. I got some amazing advice from a friend, Tony Pritzker, who lives out of Los Angeles, part of the Pritzker family, whose exact words to me, Christian, network is your net worth. Right? He said, never forget that. I said, yeah, but Tony, the only product I've ever sold is me. Like, what does life after this look like when this body doesn't do what it's supposed to do? What do I do? He said, as I said, Christian, network is your net worth. You will start to understand that as it goes, but start to find products or find opportunities that you believe you can move on. And he said, you're a clever guy. You're thinking about the right things. And the fact that you're thinking about them means, because he said most athletes I've ever dealt with, not even thinking about it. It's like they're shocked when it's over. Oh my God, what am I going to do now? Right? And I was putting those things in place. So my transition out was, how did I find it? I found it relatively easy because I was looking. I took an opportunity in Phuket in Thailand in 2013. An individual, a German Klaus Heben, wanted to build a sports center and an international school. He'd read my book and thought I could do it. Now I can't even hang up a painting. So I am dealing with the most unhandy person on the planet, but for some reason my mindset resonated with him. And as Tony, the other thing Tony had told me was, like in sport, when you see events, a lot of the time people I see are so tunnel focused at times, they miss the great opportunities that if they just glance left or right, that are usually the biggest opportunities because they're so focused ahead, right? So make sure you're looking left and right all the time, Chris, because an opportunity may present. And when it does, be courageous enough to take it, right? A lot of people second guess. He said, you've lived a life as an expat. You've left your home and come to other people's countries. So you have that adventurous spirit. So be prepared to take an opportunity. And I took this opportunity in Phuket. I told Klaus, I could do that. I had no idea, right? Absolutely no idea. But as I thought to myself, well, I'll find the people that do have an idea and I'll just manage them. And it was a $250 million project. Handed to an individual who, like I said, can't even hang up a painting. And we built the most amazing center. It's changed the face of Thailand. And he had a vision, and I helped facilitate that vision and build a team around him that made it amazing. And that was sort of my initiation of fire. I was still sort of balancing triathlon and
I remember that
work at the time. Yeah, and I was sort of crossing over. And that just that was initiated. And that was where I started to discover, oh, wow, there's a lot of similarities between, I guess, corporate people and athletes. There's a lot of egos. There's a lot of bluff. There's a lot of people pretending they know what they're talking about, but really don't have a clue. And it's just the same world. But as I said, I'm just going to apply what I've learned in sport. I'm just going to turn up, be consistent, work harder, learn, understand, ask questions. And I used to drive people insane because I'd be in these meetings and they'd use all these, in the corporate world, they use all
the
acronyms.
And,
yeah. I'm like, well, what's that mean? What's that mean? And after, but as I said, I would learn, and then no, I'm not going to do that. And I'd back my decisions, like in a race. I'm going to make a move now, and if I blow up, I blow up. And no, I'm not going to do that. We're going to do that. So I would make decisions, and I realized a lot of the time, decision making in any environment is 90% of the process. A lot of people tread water, and I was like, okay, we're going to go this path, and we're going to back it. And if you're wrong, okay, we'll reverse and go it. And so that was a big initiation of fire for me. And because I learned so much and I had so many more experienced people that had been in that world, I sort of could stand behind this athlete mantra to some degree that sort of got me in the room, but didn't really give respect corporately. But I was able to earn that respect over time by being the last to speak. I used to always be the last to speak because I used to think better for them to I don't want them to realize I don't have a clue what I'm talking about here. So I just wait for everyone to speak, and then I'll summarize everything.
What's the saying? Better to be thought a fool than to open your mouth and remove all doubt.
Exactly. And that was how I really did things. And I always found that if I was the last to talk in the room and I'm supposed to be the CEO of this organization, so I just go through all my department heads and they would sort of download everything and I just summarize and everyone think I was a genius. I was like, wow. So at times I used to think one day someone's going to see right through me, but I just sort of absorbed it like a sponge. And I sort of took that and then started consulting for people in that space. And that's how I started building my business outside of that and moving into the Middle East and moving into doing some work in China and Australia. And then it just built from there. So,
wow.
Yeah. It was an interesting journey. I wouldn't trade it for the world. And it was all because I took the courage, like I did, to become an athlete, leave my job to, yes, I'll do that. Where a lot of people, I spoke to a lot of my people that I was with and moved to Thailand with me. They're like, Thailand? I don't want to live in Thailand. I must have heard that 10 times from people that I'd been working with in Thailand. Really? Isn't there is there sewage and stuff there? I'm like, no, it's cool. Phuket's lovely. Well, nah. And now they come to you 10 years later, man, I should have moved to Thailand. Regret must be a horrible thing.
So what are the things you've had trouble leaving behind as moving from athlete to corporate CEO in a different CEO role than Chris Incorporated, if you will? What are the things that you've struggled to let go of?
I think I struggled to let go of it, that I had a young head and I didn't ask questions earlier of my failings in Kona. I was too proud because I felt that I didn't want people to see this kink in my armor that Chris McCormack doesn't know. I was fearful of other people's perception, right? It was just, so I find that hard to let go because I think it cost me an opportunity to win an Olympic gold medal or an Olympic medal, which was difficult because it was something I always wanted to do. And I think what I miss the most, probably not let go, is being so obsessed with something. Wanting something so much, where it just
singular purpose.
Yeah, it means everything. I miss that. It can be very negative at the time, but that I miss wanting something that much and it consuming my thoughts all the time, right? And that problem solving on the thing. And you have little snippets of it within the corporate world, but it's not the same. I do miss that. Yeah, I miss that a lot. And I've said that to a lot of Jan and Danny, and that's what I miss. And when you retire for a long time, but you'll miss something meaning so much to you and what you're prepared to do to get it. I put myself in hospital to win those races. What I was prepared to do to win that, to do that was just, I wouldn't do it now. I've got an older head. I'd be like, oh, no, it's too hard.
But it's interesting. Do you think there's something to the fact, personal opinion, I think there's something about endurance sport as a whole that's why people do it, because you can, I've done 11 Ironmans, 4 times at Kona, so nowhere near your level, but pretty serious about it. We won the Race Across America in 2015. So I've enjoyed that same, again, not at your level, but same sense of every day has a significant purpose. In addition to my career, my work life, what you're doing, and you get out of it what you put into it generally in endurance sports, which is not always true as an entrepreneur or a teacher or a coach or something else. If you train correctly, you may not win, but you're going to get close to the outcome you want. It seems like there's something to that you're talking about.
Yeah, and even furthermore, I find that what I like about endurance sports, and I said it in the book, where you don't play it, right? You do it. And it's the only time you're really, really honest with yourself. Yeah. Like in the world, you live through filters and this fake life, right? You tell the narrative, you project. But in an endurance sport, it's you and your head, and you are absolutely brutally honest. And that honesty, you miss that honesty with yourself. That when all those insecurities bubble to the surface, and you have to face those. Yeah. It sounds very melodramatic, but it's very real, right? And you miss that. It's such an honest conversation with yourself. All those insecurities, I'm not good enough, I'm not weak, I'm weak. They're real conversations. You can't just dismiss them. You have to deal with them on the spot in that moment. And the failure to deal with them costs you, and so there's a cost to not being honest, which I love, and that's what I find everybody. I think that's the attraction of endurance sports, is that people, for the first time when they face that, for the first time, they're being honest with themselves. Like there's a conversation that you don't usually have, because it's this bravado and this surface level sort of fakeness that we all sort of exist in to fit. Where I think the rawness of that is remarkable, remarkable. And it builds a strength in you that it resonates deep, and it really forms your personality. And as I said, I really noticed that in the corporate world, this existence in this fairyland that a lot of people, and they're defined by their job role, not defined by their actions. Yes. Where sport is very much defined by your actions, right? So it was just a very different world. It was like I went from one world to another. Very similar, but not. But not. Yeah. And you can be very successful living in this fairyland and just protect your job and don't do anything, and you just sort of exist where you would be extinct in sport. Extinct.
Totally. Yeah.
So,
I love that. We could talk about that for hours. I want to touch on London Marathon. You turned 50 this year. You've set your sights on doing it on your 50th, not your birthday, but I think it's within a week or so, right?
Yeah, it's 2 weeks. Yeah.
So how are you approaching the marathon? Is it just for grins? Is it like, I'd like to run it fast. I'd like to whatever. In fact, it seems like I remember looking up the world record for 50 was 231 or 229 at one point. I don't know. That could be off. But what are you thinking? What are you looking at for this race? How you feeling? As we're recording this, we're still about 2 months out. But where did this come from, and where are you going into this with?
Look, I always, I sort of finished sport and was like, okay, that part's done. I'm going to build businesses and do my thing. And as we just spoke, I miss purpose. Yeah. Right. I miss having a goal. And I thought, for my 50th, I always wanted to do, there was certain events around the world I wanted to do. I've always wanted to do the Cape Epic. So I've entered in that next year. I've always wanted to do the Comrades Marathon, because my father did it when I was very young. It was my drive to get into sport. And I'd always wanted to do the major marathons, right? I'd watched the London Marathon, a great Australian called Steve Monaghetti in 1989, finished second in that race to Douglas Wakahuru, and I sat up all night in Australia as a kid watching that live. One day I'm going to do that. Well, as you sort of approach 50, you're like, when's that day going to be?
That one day could be running out here.
Yeah. So I sort of said, well, do it. Like, why aren't you doing it? We're going to put it off till next year. Let's do it. And so I got a group of mates that said, who wants to do London? Awesome. A whole bunch threw their hand up and they said, let's do it. So what's my goal? I want to enjoy it. I want to experience it and just do it. And I have I haven't run much lately. Every time I tend to run, I break down. So there'll be, the body, I probably let the body go Yeah. So I want to get around 3 hours, which is not huge. I've got a group of mates that are trying to hit 3 hours. So running as a group and just enjoy the whole experience of London, and there's you'll probably see me doing a lot more sort of events like that from, there's an internal competitiveness, more a competitiveness with my friends, but just the ability to experience these monumental events that I just want to, it's sort of a bucket list. And I don't want to be sitting in my rocking chair a few years going, I should have done that, because why aren't I doing it? Like just being lazy and in my head. So it's like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to have fun. And, it's sort of, for me, it's the Monopoly board. We, in Australia, we had the English Monopoly board. I don't know if in the States you had the same one. We had Mayfair. So I get to run the Monopoly board, and that's really, really cool. And I spent a lot of time in London because our Super League offices for triathlon are in London. So it was sort of a great opportunity. I get to bring my kids up. They're a lot older now. My daughter's thinking of doing a marathon. So I said, I'll come up with Dad. I watch this one. So it's just that time in my life. I thought it was a nice thing to do.
Love it. We'll come back to that. If we're going to create you were going to create a Mount Rushmore of Kona, so you get separate men and women, 4 each, can't include yourself. Who do you put on each of those? Your Mount Rushmore women, Mount Rushmore men.
I know what Mount Rushmore is, but is the order of the presidents?
You can put in any order. We don't have to go 1, 2, 3, 4. No. You can go everything.
Yeah, on the men's side, Mark Allen is that first face on Mount Rushmore. I put Jan Frodeno, without question. You have to put Dave Scott on there as well, and I put Peter Reid on the men's side, and on the women's side, I put obviously Paula Newby-Fraser. I put McKeely Jones. I know she only won one Kona, but she's, in my opinion, probably the greatest female triathlete to ever do it. And having trained a lot with McKeely, Kona was not on her list of things to do, right? She was like, she was like, oh, I'll do it. And then she went second first. Thank you, done. Told you. So we could have seen so much more out of her. Chrissy Wellington, obviously, and Daniela Reef. People say American Halfway or others, but maybe I'm biased towards McKeely just because of, I think she was very integral in shaping a lot of those Ironman athletes, even in the Paula years, because of the standards she set in the races that they used to use. She was basically a catalyst for their improvement.
It's funny. I can still hear McKeely's voice on the NBC production of it, where she's talking about the crosswinds. And she's like, the crosswinds. And every time I'm out riding in the wind, I think of McKeely's voice talking about the crosswinds. Are you going to look Chrissy up when you're out? I guess if you're in London all the time, you guys probably see each other.
Yeah. She's just out of London. So, yeah, she sort of removes herself. She does a lot of park running.
Yeah.
I think she went through that whole part where it was very, very hard for her to be. She was in a very big, tough training environment. And I think she's like, a lot of damage. I think you're starting to see a nibble a little bit more and starting to come back into the fray a lot. But
So there's a lot of changes happening with Ironman. If you were in charge, what changes would you and would you not make? And the obvious example, they're going to split between Kona and Nice over the next few years and see how that goes. But let's come back to that one specifically in a minute. Just off the top, what changes would you make if you were suddenly put in charge of Ironman? They're going to do whatever you suggest they do. What would be some of the things you'd recommend?
And they don't need to be popular. So this is from
you don't have to be popular. This is for the best steps for the sport of Ironman distance triathlon.
Well, I can tell from it's an interesting conversation because there was a period there where one of our investors in Super League, we went through the process of potentially acquiring Ironman for $1 billion.
Yes.
So we had a big think tank around this and the discussions around it. I think I'd go back. I think Ironman, the actual, and if you look at the participation model of athletes that do Ironman, that come to not the 70.3, but the Ironman race.
Yes. Yeah.
I think last count there was 52 Ironmans in the world, 56 it might have been.
Wow.
I may be wrong. Yeah, it's ridiculous, right? But what that race means to people is a lot more valuable, and this is not going to be popular, right? Is a lot more valuable than $800, right? To climb Mount Everest, it costs $60,000, right? But they've got the 70.3 now, right? So this is where people should cut their teeth. If you want to do Ironman too, but this top Ironman racing event there needs to be a level of scarcity attached to it. And so I'd increase the registration fee for that. I'd limit the amount of races. I'd reduce the amount of Ironman races, and I'd put scarcity in. In order to do an Ironman, you'd have to do, like the old days, you'd have to ratify through 2 or 3 70.3. So feed your business model up for your 70.3 system and start to establish what you did in Kona in other venues, lock-in venues, and put some history around an event. Unfortunately, triathlon has been owned by so many people. It's been split up and sold off and cut off that we've forgotten what makes things valuable, what sports assets are valuable. It's longevity, time. You get history on the course. And embracing that's important so people can buy into something. So I'd increase the price of an Ironman substantially, which is not popular.
But you cut it down from 50-ish to 12.
Yeah, 15 maybe, put some in key areas and create and people are only getting 3,000. So you're only going to get 30, 40,000 people a year doing an Ironman, which means the value of that product, scarcity.
Right.
The value of that goes up, right? So you're an Ironman, it means something. Now, I remember the days you used to get on an airplane and I do triathlon. What's that? Now everyone knows what it is. Yeah. It's sort of like, I do an Ironman. So does my friend down here who he trained for one for 3 weeks and he did one in, you're losing what it means to people. When people are tattooing that onto their legs, this is what it means. And anyone who's been to an Ironman race and stood there at the finish line, I went to Barcelona last year with some peers who did it. It is the most powerful. It is a very powerful brand. I think they're diluting its value in that sense. So I'd fix that element up. I would not just license it out all the time. It's supply and demand, basic economics. I'd build out that 70.3 model a lot more. I'd have that as the main racing because it's still a big challenge for a lot of people. And I use that to feed the desire to go up in distance. A lot of people won't. Where Ironman, when it was only 10 races, they didn't have that 70.3 piece to make money. And that's a tough distance for many people. And it's a great distance for people to step up to. And so I'd create that qualification model. The splitting of I understand why the professional element is not as important to the business model because, Ironman's built off licensing and licensing to sponsors, registration fees. It's a mass participation product. So the professionals are a drain on EBITDA to some degree. So, but I do think it's a triangular feeder model, right? I think the pros need the amateurs need the pros need the amateurs, and the sponsors need the so disrespecting that synergy or, that sort of is at the detriment to the sport. So I would create, which the PTO is doing now, some sort of value across those Ironman races and a league, but I would never split the men and women. No way. I'm not against, I'm not against the World Championships moving, right? I think what I'm against is the World Championships for men and the World Championships for women being on two different courses are two different. We've always triathlon has been together since its beginning, right? Like it's, I cannot believe there's not more uproar about it. It's like, that blows me away, to be honest. I think splitting that is wrong, but I think the rotation back to Kona every other year, or 1 year it's the World Championships and the other year it's just for amateurs to experience the island. It becomes just another race, but every other second year it becomes the World Championships, because I think there's a lot more cut through you can do. If we saw Christian Blumenfeld this year win in St. George because the catch up from the COVID year, and he couldn't win in Kona. So there's a conversation around, well, can you win both? Like, can an athlete, if they win, in Nice next year, if Alistair Brownlee wins Nice World Championships this year, can he do that in Kona? So there's a value play for the athlete, and there's a value play for the storytelling in the sport. I'd actually improve the production quality that they do of the event, invest in that, right, a lot more, because I think, you're seeing it with, the Netflix and that with the Drive to Survive. There's a lot more storytelling than just showing a live stream of a race. I think PTO is trying to do that. We do that with Super League. There's a lot to do. It's not one fix. It's easy for me. I just think when private equity moves into buys sports assets, they have an exit strategy. Advance have been in there 4 years now, so they're exiting, right? They're 3 years away in their head, potentially exiting. How do I get out of this, and how do I get best return? And so a lot of the decisions are made not with the sport at its core, but just how to maximize the money. So I understand why they're doing it, but what's it look like post this cut up will be interesting. So yeah. It's too much to answer on one.
But I want to circle back on one of the things you said, because you've run the numbers on one of your recommendations, and I don't go through the numbers with us, but it made financial sense to shrink from 50 to 12 and then grow the 70.3 to make up for that in terms of the EBITDA.
Yeah, you can. Well, I think it's almost a hockey stick, right? Sure, your short-term revenue may drop on the Ironman front, but you can slowly increase it. I think the value of Ironman as an entity will go up. You see it with Comrades. When my father did the Comrades Marathon, I think it was $20 to do it. Now there is 40,000 people running it that are paying nearly $1,000 to do it, right? Like it's changed because the value of that buckle,
right?
The value of you to be able to walk around and say, I've done Comrades and there's is enormous. So you'll drive that value up. And once the value's there, sponsors that are trying to plug into that value pay more. It's common sense, right? It's the difficulty of being prepared to invest in the sport, which private equity isn't. They're happy to invest, but spread. Yeah. So,
all right, man. We've been rolling for longer than I promised you here. So let's just wrap up. And you've touched on this a little bit, but misconceptions about Chris McCormack. What is out there that you would like to reformat or clarify is probably a better word. This has been a blast. Like anybody that sits down and talks to you is just going to be like, I like this dude. What's out there that you feel like, yeah, the people that know, but maybe the general public doesn't. Maybe they don't understand this about Chris. Any of those things you'd like to just pop through before we wrap this thing up?
No, because I think I'm so long from the sport now. I used to had we had this conversation as I was exiting the sport.
Sure.
Yeah, there was a lot, right? But I think now you just as you get older, you just don't.
You don't care.
So, those who know me, like a lot of the people that were joking were fans to some degree. But I have an element of envy to some degree of the modern day athlete and their ability to control their own story narrative. My day, it was about being friends with the editor.
Right.
So if I didn't get on with the triathlete editor, John Duke, which I didn't, John, if you're listening, I didn't like him and he didn't like me, right? And so they controlled, because that was the only way people communicated. Right. So they controlled how people viewed you. So a lot of people's perception, I don't know how many times in my career people go, you're such a nice guy. I thought you're a jerk. I'm like, why would you think I never met you? Like, and so I think if I could, anyone that knew me back then, those who never met me, I was a competitive person, no doubt, but you're a professional and it's crowded. There can be only one winner of anything, right? So, yeah, whilst you're a fan and I was always respectful of my peers, I'm still very close friends with 90% of my peers. So I think that's a big statement, even though we were competitive, we understood the environment. People wrote about it and they created a villain, a hero,
sure.
And you had
every
no
story.
say.
Yep.
Every story, right?
Yep.
So I think the testament's in my peers I'm still friendly with, and I just think I was just a passionate individual, impatient to succeed because I knew there was a finite time to this. I had a father in the background going, mate, you're doing the stupidest thing in the world. What are you doing triathlon for? But I just think more than anything, I want people to that passion's thrown around so much. I hear everything, I'm passionate, everyone's passionate.
Right.
I get that. It's overkill, but I was a very passionate individual, very, very, very much loyal with my team and my family and my group. They probably came off like a pack and a gang because whilst I might have been the world champion and the man, I'm insecure, right? You're insecure in your own space. And there's only a small group of people that know that insecurity that you share with openly and honestly. Right. As I said, your bravado sits out there. You're the man and you got a thing. And so that pack gets smaller and tighter and does present like a pack. So I think the cockiness is funny because if you ask my wife got cocky. He's amazing. Hey, he cried in serendipity. It's the furthest thing with cocky is weak. And I think more than anything, I carried a lot of guilt from not being home when my mother passed. And I felt that triathlon took away so much from my family. I carried that a lot. That's why I was always, promise you, my wife gave up everything for me, right? So I think that's why post-career it's been so cool. Like we do everything together, and so family for me was always important. So I guess I'm not as cocky, or I hate that word cocky. Yes, I believed I was honest. If I was asked a question, I gave you the answer. I didn't give you the public, the media answer. It's like, I just come out here to race, I wish everybody the best. That's bullshit. No athlete is the Super Bowl guys the other day aren't standing down the field. I hope the Chiefs do, the Eagles do a great. I wish them all the best out there. They're in that locker room going, I'm going to kill, right? It's sport, and people sometimes misconstrue that competitiveness with arrogance or he's a bully, or it's like, man, there can be only one. And my life is defined. Now I'm post my career. We're talking because I won Kona twice. But I've been everyone's best friend. You're not talking to others that who got third. I ask people in the sport. Tell me who got third in these 5 Konas. Just give me one name. I got no idea. Exactly.
Or second.
Exactly. And so we know that. The individual knows that, and I get to live he has to live with the fact that he was third, and I get to live with the fact that I won, and I don't regret one bit of how I went about doing it. And I know my peers don't, but sometimes I felt that the press and other people viewed it as, because they're looking at it through different eyes. They're looking at it, they think that, everyone's the best mates, and you shake hands, and you do, you're friendly, but it can get tense in the locker room, right? Like you don't get on with everybody, and that's cool. I think everyone can take away my loyalty is probably at the detriment to me at times, but I'm a very, 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 the people that were in my life in sport are still in my life in business, right? And they will be because I feel that I've shared a journey, and when I'm old, it's great to have people around you that can relate to certain points in your life. I'm not talking with new people. They go, I want to do triathlon. Oh, you did triathlon? Oh yeah, I bet. Yeah. I can reflect with people that are, and that's really, really cool. So my 4 best mates, we've been at it for years, and they're working with me now, and we grew up together, and that's a unique place. So I think my loyalty is pretty cool.
That's awesome. Brother, thanks for doing this. This was fantastic. So much fun. It's good to see you.
Oh, cheers. Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Thanks for tuning into the #1 podcast for health and wellness coaching. We're grateful for your support as we approach our 270th episode. By the way, if you're a health and wellness coach and you haven't yet signed up for the coaching event of the year, the Rocky Mountain Coaching Retreat and Symposium in Estes Park, Colorado this September, don't wait. Both the rooms and the registration are limited. All the details can be found under the retreat tab at catalystcoachinginstitute.com or email us anytime. Results at catalystcoaching360.com. And now it's time to be a catalyst. This is Catalyst Coaching 360, Dr. Brad Cooper. Make it a great rest of your week, and I'll speak with you soon on the next episode of the Catalyst 360 podcast, or maybe over on the YouTube coaching channel.